I go by the name Cole and had been married for 6 years. I've always had a knack for tinkering and creating things, and it turned out that many people were interested in what I came up with. I even had a few patents under my belt for some nifty gadgets. When I sold those patents, I decided to play it safe and stash the payment in a trust fund until I could figure out my next move. Back when I was 22, I had just finished my 3-year stint in the Army as a medical equipment repair technician. It was during my time in the service that I discovered my love for working with and fixing equipment. So during the day, I landed a job repairing bakery equipment at a wholesale bakery, and at night, I was hitting the books pursuing my degree in electrical engineering. On top of all that, I was casually dating some ladies from my high school days, and a few I met after leaving the Army. One Friday night, I found myself at a local lounge nursing a beer and taking in the scene. As luck would have it, I spotted one of my coworkers, Lisa, sitting in a booth with a couple of other ladies. Since the bar was packed, I mustered up the courage to ask if I could join them. After getting the green light from everyone, I settled into the booth and introduced myself to Lisa, who then introduced me to her booth mates, Cindy and Mary. Cindy caught my eye right away, but Mary didn't quite click with me. It wasn't that I disliked her. We just didn't vibe. She wasn't mean or anything. We just didn't have that connection. Cindy kindly scooted over so I could sit next to her in the booth, and Lisa and I caught up on our lives outside of work. I tried to strike up a conversation with Mary, but it seemed like we were speaking different languages. We just couldn't seem to find common ground. Cindy was completely focused as I tried my best to engage Mary in conversation. However, it became evident that my efforts were in vain. Cindy then requested that I move so she could use the restroom. Suddenly, I found myself alone in the booth as the ladies convened for a committee meeting. At least they entrusted me with the task of watching their purses. Once the meeting concluded, Lisa returned and swiftly gathered her and Mary's belongings. She informed Cindy and me that Mary wasn't feeling well, and she was taking her home. This left me alone with Cindy, creating an awkward atmosphere for a few moments. I asked her if she wanted to leave or if I should depart. She declined both options and expressed gratitude for my attempt to converse with Mary. It turned out that Mary had discovered her fiancé C cheating with an ex-girlfriend, which had temporarily soured her opinion of all men. From that point on, Cindy and I conversed as if we were the only ones in the entire place. After a couple of hours filled with beer and pizza, I managed to convince her to share her phone number with me, promising to call her. As we prepared to leave, I offered her a ride, but she declined since she had her own car parked there. She hadn't arrived with Lisa. The following day, I called her, and we arranged a date for the upcoming weekend. We attended a play at a local theater, which happened to be Cindy's first experience of watching a live performance. She instantly became a fan. After the play, we enjoyed a late dinner together, which was delightful and led to more dates. Eventually, we became exclusive and started dating until I completed my degree. I secured a job as an assistant engineer at a nearby electrical contracting company and asked Cindy to marry me. She happily accepted. 18 months later, we tied the knot. Mary served as the maid of honor, while Lisa was a bridesmaid. It was a beautiful wedding, and the reception was filled with joy and laughter. I've mentioned this before, but I've always been a tinkerer since my high school days. I even had a few bakery and commercial restaurant equipment patents that were well received by the industry. To handle all of this, I started my own company while working as a construction electrical engineer. I made sure that all the money went into a company account, so I had something that was solely mine. Through the company, I managed to buy the house we were renting. Things were going really well for about 3 years. I got promoted to lead engineer on a major construction project, and Cindy found a new job in the neighborhood. She believed that since we were financially stable, it was the perfect time to start a family. We tried everything to get her pregnant, but nothing seemed to work. After 2 years, we finally went to a specialist and discovered that due to an injury I had in the service, my sperm count was extremely low, and the sperm I produced wasn't motile. Cindy became upset, and our sex life came to a halt. It was like someone had flipped a switch. I tolerated it for about 7 months, but eventually, I reached my breaking point. I sat down with her and said, "I'm moving out. It's clear that you no longer want any intimacy with me. It's not my fault that I'm infertile. If having kids is more important to you than our life together, maybe we should consider getting a divorce." She started crying, saying she didn't want a divorce and she didn't want me to leave, that she's just so disappointed that we won't have kids, and that she forgot how much I meant to her, and she'll try to be better. I replied, "That won't solve our problems. Your attempts to be better are just as much of an issue as what we're going through now. I don't want you to try. I want you to genuinely want to improve. I won't be far away, and if you ever need anything, you can always call me. I suggest we seek marriage counseling. If you're not open to that, then you should consider getting counseling for yourself. I love you with all my heart, and I'm not leaving just because we haven't been intimate, but I can't bear to be near you when your pain is causing me so much anguish." When I finally finished speaking, she remained silent for a moment before asking, "Where will you go? What will you do? When will you come back? How will you know if I get better?" "Please don't leave," I said. "To answer your questions, I'll still be here in the city. I'll continue working, and I won't abandon you because I love you. However, I need to take some time away. Your pain is hurting me so deeply that I'm afraid it might turn into anger. My mother has offered me a place to stay in the apartment above her garage, and your parents have offered me an apartment in their building. I won't be far away. Please seek help. I can't bear the pain you're causing me. I'll come back when I can see that you love me enough to not flinch when I touch you." She lowered her head, sobbed, and then suddenly snapped at me. "Fine, you jerk. Leave when things get tough. Just go." "I'll consult the lawyer before I see a damn therapist. Just go." These words came from a woman who wouldn't even say a curse word. I was taken aback. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and began packing my belongings. Tears streamed down her face as I packed. I packed up my car and hooked up the small trailer we used for camping. It wasn't even close to being full, but I was hoping I wouldn't be gone for too long. I drove for about 20 minutes until I reached my mom's house and started unpacking. After a couple of hours, my mom came up to me and said that Cindy was on the phone. I told her to please take a message or ask her to call my cell phone, that after that last argument, I don't think I'm ready for more right now. I said, "Mom, I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I love Cindy so much, but it's become so difficult just to get a simple kiss from her. I don't know if you want to hear this, but we haven't been intimate since we found out I'm unable to have children. Cindy wants a family, and I even offered to get a divorce if it would make her happy. I'm at a loss for what to do. I'm hoping that moving out will shock her enough to realize the pain she's causing. If not, I might be staying here for a while." I said goodnight to my mom and went to bed. The next day at work, 2 policemen showed up at the construction site and asked to speak with me. They said they were following up on the burglary at my house the previous night. I was shocked. They explained that someone had tried to break into my house through the basement window around 3 a.m. My wife had called the police, and when they arrived, the intruder fled. They asked me why someone would target my house for burglary. I told them about the various gadgets I had and some that I was currently working on. I informed them that I had temporarily moved out and that I would go back home that night to assess the situation. They then revealed the shocking news. "Sir, we had to admit your wife to the hospital. It seems like she had a psychotic episode. She's not in any danger, but the patrolman who responded to the call mentioned that she was hysterical. She's currently at the psych ward in the hospital. She had asked the man she was with to leave the house. I'll go see her right away. Don't worry about my belongings. They're not worth a single hair on her head," I assured them. "Please convey my gratitude to all the officers involved. I'll do whatever I can to resolve these issues." It wasn't until the next day that I realized there was a man with her during the incident. When I arrived at the hospital, I was informed that I was on the excluded visitors list and wouldn't be allowed to see Cindy. I inquired about who made the list, and they told me that Cindy and the doctors had contributed to it. To my dismay, my wife had put me on the excluded list. I was furious. At that moment, I decided that enough was enough. I returned to the apartment and stewed for a while before deciding to take action. Firstly, I called the hospital and requested to speak with the doctor. He promptly returned my call and informed me that I was also excluded from receiving any medical updates. This only fueled my anger further. Next, I contacted her parents and informed them about the situation. They expressed their disagreement with her actions and promised to keep me informed. I recounted the events of the past few days and explained how her behavior had led me to believe that moving out was the right decision. After letting Cindy's parents attend to their own matters, I dialed my mother's number. She had worked as a paralegal before retiring, so I sought her advice on finding a good divorce lawyer. I explained that Cindy had completely shut me out of her life, and perhaps my actions would compel her to seek help. I suggested that maybe through a divorce, she could have the children she seemed fixated on. Reluctantly, my mother provided me with the name of a lawyer. I thanked her and allowed her to return to her activities. I decided to take matters into my own hands and called the police to get a copy of the report for my insurance. They told me it would be ready in half an hour, but I had to go pick it up in person. Apparently, electronic transfer wasn't an option due to legal restrictions. When I got the report, something didn't add up. The broken window was only 6 inches high and 24 inches wide, making it impossible for anyone to fit through. On top of that, there were only small footprints around the window, possibly belonging to a female or a child. And to make things even stranger, there was another person in the house named Jack, who was dressed in a robe at 3 a.m., along with Cindy. The name Jack rang a bell, but I couldn't quite place where I had heard it before. According to the report, neither Cindy nor Jack saw who tried to break in. But Cindy was really upset about both their names being in the police report. Suddenly it clicked. I remembered that Jack was a sales associate at her workplace, where I had met him once before. I also recalled that his wife was the owner of the company. What on earth was he doing in my house at such an odd hour? The next day, I called the lawyer, expecting a man, but it turned out to be a woman. I scheduled an appointment with her for later in the day. I then called my workplace and informed them that my assistant could handle everything while I took the rest of the week off as personal time. My boss immediately called back, insisting that I come to work right away. I relayed the urgency of the situation, and he granted me the time off. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, I requested a divorce filing and a lawsuit against the office where Cindy and Jack worked. I also asked for a potential eviction notice since the house belonged to my company, and Cindy had no ownership in it. We were merely renting it from the company I had established to promote my patents and gadgets. I explained that I had a police report proving that Cindy had a man at the house at 3 a.m. Additionally, I mentioned that I had temporarily left due to some issues between us, and coincidentally, the man was there on the same night I left. She informed me that Cindy was currently under a mandatory 14-day hospitalization, which my insurance was covering. She said she would lift the medical information blackout only if I authorized payment. She then suggested that I immediately move back into the house. She also advised me to contact the bank to set withdrawal limits on all joint accounts and cancel any joint ATM cards. After taking care of all the banking matters, I returned to the house and discovered Jack attempting to enter. I parked my car in the driveway, blocking his way, and he started approaching me. In response, I quickly dialed the non-emergency police line on my cell phone and requested to speak with an officer. As Jack came closer and motioned for me to roll down the window, I shook my head no, and instead showed him my ID from my wallet. Seeing this, he immediately ran off down the road. I chuckled and asked the officer if they had any information about the damage caused by the break-in at my house. They informed me that the only damage was a broken window caused by a drunken neighbor who mistakenly wandered into the driveway. She struck the window when her key didn't fit the door, and then she fled. The next day, she called the police station and promised to pay for the damages. I entered the house and went into what used to be our bedroom, only to find a man's clothes in the dresser drawers that I had previously emptied. I rummaged through every closet and drawer, collecting the clothes that didn't belong to me. With the stash in hand, I headed out to the garage, where we had our secret, totally illegal incinerator. Hoping for Jack's return, I left the garage door wide open. Just like that, as I was tossing the last load into the fiery pit, he appeared. A smile crept across my face as he approached the door. I called out to him, curious about his intentions. Upon witnessing my actions, he simply shook his head and entered the garage. "I suppose I deserve this," he admitted. "I thought Cindy was divorced. She's been claiming that you left her for another woman 6 months ago." I responded, "So, you thought you could move in? Well, let me set things straight. I'm the one renting this house, and Cindy hasn't contributed a single penny towards the rent. She has no claim over it. I moved out 3 days ago due to a temporary fallout with my wife, and trust me, your wife's company will be hearing from my attorney soon." His face turned pale, and I couldn't help but laugh. "By the way," I added, "when you visit Cindy, kindly inform her that all her belongings will be relocated to her parents' house once she's released. Oh, and tell her I finally understand the reason for the freeze." "One last thing," I screamed, unable to contain my anger. "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" He remained silent, swiftly getting into his car as I opened the gate for him. Once he drove off, I returned to the house and called a locksmith. To wrap up the afternoon, I made copies of the police report. I made a copy for my insurance company just in case. Another copy was made for Cindy's parents in case they tried to blame me for everything. Then I placed a copy in our basement safe. As for the original, I planned on keeping it in my personal safe deposit box at the bank. Inside that box, I had all the patent papers and a bank book where I stored the money I earned from patent licensing agreements. The money from my job and about 10% of the patent money were in our joint accounts, which is all the money Cindy knows about. It's not a lot, but it should be enough for her if we ever split up. I kept the hidden money because I wanted something that was solely mine. Cindy found out about the house, so she wouldn't be able to claim it in a divorce. It wasn't a deal breaker, though. The next morning, I spent my time packing up all of her clothes, makeup, toiletries, and any pictures that didn't include me. We had some boxes stored away that we broke down and used for this purpose. In the early afternoon, the locksmith arrived and changed the locks. Afterwards, I took all the boxes to her parents' apartment building and gave them a copy of the police report. They weren't thrilled, but they accepted the items. I left without any further discussion. My lawyer got back to me and informed me that the threat of non-payment was enough to obtain all of the medical information. It turns out Cindy was about 6 weeks pregnant and panicked when she realized the police would find out about Jack being at the house during that time. She even screamed at the officers who came to investigate the break-in. Eventually, she started screaming and crying uncontrollably. The officers had to restrain her, and she was committed to a 14-day psychiatric evaluation. Sadly, she lost the baby, which pushed her even further. The doctors wanted to keep her for 90 days as she was almost suicidal. They also noticed that her hormone levels were elevated, as if she had been taking fertility drugs. However, they couldn't find any prescriptions from the doctors she claimed were treating her. The pregnancy bombshell was the last straw for me. I made it clear to my lawyer that once Cindy was discharged from the hospital, I wanted her served with the divorce papers. I explained to my lawyer that I have fertility issues, and the few sperms I have are damaged. I also advised her to immediately take legal action against the company due to their strict anti-fraternization policy. I told her to make it a painful process for them, but not to go overboard. As part of the settlement, both of them were to be terminated without any recommendation or severance package. The lawsuit against the company was promptly filed, and Jack's wife informed my lawyer through her lawyer that they were ready to fight. My lawyer informed the opposing attorney that they had evidence of unprofessional behavior from both parties. Although she didn't mention the pregnancy, she did bring up the police report of Jack being at the house at 3 a.m. The attorney representing the company was caught off guard by this information, as his client had failed to mention it. My lawyer speculated that she might not have been aware of it. Upon hearing her name, the lawyer suggested a settlement. After the lawyers reconvened, a settlement was reached. I received a fair amount of money, and both Jack and Cindy were terminated from their positions. Jack's wife initiated divorce proceedings based on the police report. He had lied to her, claiming he was visiting a customer site that night to get an early start. I found out about this from one of Cindy's colleagues at the office. Cindy left the hospital before the commitment papers were filed. She was served with the divorce papers. Afterwards, she vanished, and I didn't hear from her for over a year. She did, however, sign and return the divorce papers, but she didn't ask for anything from the marriage, not even her entitled share. About 15 months later, she sent me a letter of apology. It came all the way from a little town in Montana. She didn't go into much detail about her life since the divorce. The letter was simply her way of saying sorry for the hurt she had caused me.